Good morning to doctor. My name is Wong Yi Hao with the metric number A196171. Next
Morning,
to
doctor.
yeah.
Morning, sir. My name is Aubrey Ko Jin Ming, with the metric number A194546.
Good morning, doctor. My name is Lai Kiam Hao with the metric number A194507.
Morning, doctor.
My name
My
is
name is
Zheng He.
Chua Guangli with the matrix number A196226.
My name is Zakai. My metric number is A194757.
All right. Hello and welcome to this forum on human trafficking. To those tuning in online for this panel discussing, first and foremost, I would love your participation, and I'm going to try and incorporate your questions as we go. So be kind, please. We'll do our best, and I also want to remind you on social, if you are sharing, #WSF23. My name is Wong Yi Hao. I'm with the World Social Forum. Joining me here on board, we have Mr. Chua Guangyi, Executive Officer of the Council for Anti-Trafficking in Persons and Anti-Smuggling of Migrants, MAPO. I have Mr. Aubrey Ko Jin Ming, Ambassador of the Hope for Justice, Mr. Lai Kiam Hao, Director of the Stop Human Trafficking Association, SHUT, and Mr. Zakai, the Chief Executive of Department of Performance Management and Delivery from the Malaysia Airline Berhad, MAP. We are going to hear a little bit from each of them, and then we'll have some time for some questions. So now I think it's very important to understand that human trafficking is not an isolated event, and it doesn't happen overnight. So if we look at causes, I think it depends from what standpoint we are approaching the issues. So spiritually, we definitely see that greed and lust, and they play an important role in this. And now, as far as social causes, we need to look at vulnerabilities. And traffickers, they prey on vulnerable targets, and we say that human trafficking starts with a dream of a better life. And we all want a better life, but the people who are vulnerable, they will sometimes take risks in order to fulfill these things. So, for example, if you are poor, your dream is probably have more money, and traffickers knows that. That becomes a vulnerability, and lack of education becomes a vulnerability also. Actually, discrimination, the countries that have a problem with discrimination, you will see minorities being trafficked more because of the social injustice that happens, and because of the fact that there is not a system in place where people are seen as equally valuable. So think of vulnerabilities, and then you're going to see how this play into, and how traffickers act, and how people end up being sold into slavery. And without further ado, I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Chua, and ask you just to run us through the issue of labor trafficking, why it's so common in Malaysia and worldwide, and who are the most targeted group as victim. So, Mr. Chua, over to you.
So thank you. First of all, I would like to define the meaning of the labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is a form of a modern-day slavery in which the individual perform the labor or the service through the use of the force, fraud, or coercion. Labor trafficking includes the situation of the debt bondage, forced labor, and involuntary child labor. Next, I will explain why the labor trafficking is the most common one in the Malaysia and also the worldwide. The labor trafficking is the most common form of the human trafficking because it involves the child labor and the debt bondage, which both of these are happening the most higher frequency among the society. Child labor refers to the exploitation of the children through any form of work that deprives the children of their childhood, interferes with their ability to attend a regular school, and is mentally, physically, socially, morally harmful. Such exploitation is prohibited by the legislation of the worldwide. The main cause that lead to this happening most of the time is due to some external factor, such as the poverty, war, natural disaster, and search for the better life. Traffickers look for the people who are susceptible to the coercion into the human trafficking industry, especially those who tend to migrate, escape from their home due to the financial problem, natural disaster, conflict, or political instability. Besides that, many of them are forced to involve themselves into the labor trafficking. Some are forced by the parent, but a lot of is the voluntary, because they fail to change the environment surrounding them. Consequently, this kind of the children mainly work in the agriculture, home-based assembly operation, factory, mining, and service such as the newsboy. So now I will give some evidence in the Malaysia. So in East Malaysia, Sabah has 10 of thousands of the local and non-citizen children. Some of them are working informally and assisting their parents undertaking the oil pump activity. Some live in the poverty and do not have the opportunity to access the education. From the total 43 sample population among the children of the local and Indonesian migrant workers in 3 rural villages in the Lahad Datu, Sabah, it's found that 2 in every 3 children are involved in the oil pump activity. Half of them are the children and responsibility to assisting the parents, and another half as the working children, while the children assisting parents spend less than 2 hours per day to help their parents, while the working children dedicated nearly 1/3 of their daily time to undertaking the oil pump activity. So this strongly indicated that the child labor happened in the Malaysia. In the world poorest country, around 1 in 4 the children involved in the child labor. 4 African nations, Mali, Benin, Chad, and Guinea-Bissau, witnessed over 50% of the children aged between the 5 to 14 is working. They're responsible in the cultivating the soil or harvesting the any agricultural. Also feeding, training, and management of the livestock such as the bee, fur-bearing animals, and also the wildlife. Besides that, I will explain about the debt bondage. Debt bondage is another form of the labor trafficking, why is cause is that's the most common one. So the debt bondage is the pledge of a person's service as the security for the repayment for a debt or other obligation, where the term of the repayment sometimes are not clearly or reasonably stated. The person who holds the debt has some control over by the laborer. So people who experience the debt bondage have often been tricked into the working for a little or no pay. Most of the money they earn goes to pay off their loan. Recent data show that COVID-19 pandemic result in a risk of the debt bondage, as many workers were unable to borrow the money from the formal channel. In some society, debt is shared by the whole family who have to work together to pay off the debt. Sometimes, the debt can even be inherited by the children, so who are then forced into slavery because their parents fail to pay off the debt. So next, I will explain why there is the vast amount of the human labor targeted by the traffickers. This is because the women and the children always are the target of the trafficker. Traditional attitudes and practice of the early marriage and lack of the birth legislation further increase the susceptibility of the women and children involved in the human trafficking. They are also targeted because of the demand of the women in sex trafficking, which is also considered as one type of the forced labor. Besides that, there is also a demand for the cheap domestic and agricultural labor. Employees are often initially promised with a safe workplace and steady salary. Later find that they are paid less than the minimum wage and work overtime. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Chua, for that. I think I kind of captured child labor, debt bondage, exploitation, agriculture, and domestic work to sort of synthesize your 5. We'll come back to you on how you see this sort of moving forward in those areas of issues as well. Now, Mr. Aubrey, if I can turn to you, of course, you are actively on the ground in Malaysia during the first week, and I think in particular around this human trafficking, specifically on child marriage. So as a trend, are things improving or getting worse as it relates to child marriage? Maybe can you just talk to us about some of your thinking on how we move forward from here?
Thank you. So I'll be touching upon 3 aspects of child marriage. First, child marriage itself. Second, even though child marriage has received very limited attention in research, and although there are certainly human rights violations, it is not entirely clear whether human child marriage meets the definition of human trafficking. And finally, I would like to touch upon, even though child marriage is illegal, but it still occurs at a very high frequency. So first, what is child marriage? Child marriage is a formal or informal union of before the age of 18, and according to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, they define that child marriage as any marriage that involves either one or both parents that are below the age of 18. So, child marriage is a violation of children's human rights and the form of gender-based violence that robs children out of their childhood. In child marriage, normally, young girls face a plethora of disadvantages after an early marriage. So, this includes severe health consequences, complications during and after pregnancy, domestic violence, and physical abuse, and the loss of education and employment opportunities. Child marriage affects the victim's physical and physiological health as well as their social and economic well-being. So that's all for my first part. Before I move on to the second part, which is whether child marriage meets the definition of human trafficking, I would like to further elaborate on what child marriage is by talking about the factors that leads to the prevalence of child marriage. So child marriage is still occurring at this time of age due to many factors, and according to a statistic cited by Datuk Heng Seng Kee in 2015, a former deputy minister of Women, Family and Community Development, it shows that an estimated of 16,000 girls were married before the age of 15 as of October 2010. And in April of 2016, the Department of Sharia Judiciary Malaysia, or Jabatan Kehakiman Sharia Malaysia, JKSM, Muhammad Nazri Abdul Rahman revealed that there were about 10,000 child marriage applications between the year 2005-2015, adding that irresponsible parents, in this case fathers, were manipulating the legal system to have their underage daughters to be married to cover up the instances of rape within the family. And before we can take imperative steps to decrease the high frequency of child marriage, understanding the factors behind it is vital. So one of the factors that leads to child marriage has to be poverty. In poverty family, female members, mainly female children, are victimized. A poor family usually jeopardizes female children. Every chances is opted so that the burden of a female child is avoided. In some countries, the younger the daughter is, the higher the dowry that the groom's family has to pay. This influences the daughter's family to sell off their own daughter as soon as possible, as earlier as possible. In fact, child marriage rates are highest in countries that are poorest in the world. All right, and my claim on poverty being one of the major factors of child marriage is also supported by a research journal titled Causes and Consequences of Child Marriage in South Asia by Sofia Navid and Khalid Manzobat. In the research, they stated that poverty was stated to be one of the pronounced contributing factors where it is economically more feasible to marry their daughters at a younger age, since the expenses of marriage are lower. And from this research, I would like to highlight a phrase that really impacted me, is that they stated that gender discrimination is at the root of harmful traditional practices done against girls and young women, and such practices are perpetrated in order to maintain the dominant position of men and boys over women and girls in the patriarchal society. So moving on, I would like to touch on the second factor that I think is one of the most that leads to child marriage has to be the pervasiveness of sexism in many cultures. Where patriarchal norms prevail, women are considered the assets of their own fathers and their future husband, where they has no say on when or who they were married. So in the research has found that uneven gender relationships are major contributing factors to teen pregnancy and marriage. Lastly, a lack of education and awareness on the part of every party involved in child marriage, including the girls themselves, their parents, and their future husband, is another contributing factors. Girls with no formal education are more likely to be victims of forced marriage at a young age compared to girls who have already obtained their secondary education or even higher. If parents were educated, they will also realize and aware that how damaging, how impactful child marriage can have towards their daughters. So, according to an article titled "Child Marriage in Bangladesh: Trends and Determinants: Studies on Women in Kenya and Nepal," have shown that each additional level of education beyond primary school lowers the probability of early marriage. Consistent with these earlier studies, this current studies reveals that the higher the post-primary education among women, the lower the probability of child marriage. So, before I end my part, I would like to define whether child marriage really fits in the definition of human trafficking. So, yes, to me, child marriage indeed fits the definition of human trafficking, because human trafficking refers to modern-day slavery involving the illegal transport of individuals by force or deception for the purpose of labor, sexual exploitation, activities in which others benefit financially. It affects all ages. Hence, child marriage indeed fits the definition of human trafficking. With this, I'll pass back to you.
Sorry for interrupting. After hearing about the fruitful sharing from the Mr. Aubrey, I am eager to provide some of my own opinion as well. From what Mr. Aubrey mentioned about the factor, I would like to share some of my view about the prevention step. One of the prevention steps of the child marriage is educate the parents. This is because some parents from the traditional community believe that the child marriage is a way to protecting their daughter. This because child marriage can providing their daughter economically, so she will be taken care of. They also believe that the child marriage safeguarding their daughter from the harassment and sexual violence before she reached the puberty. So I think that the government should organize the campaign awareness among the public, especially in the rural area, which cannot access to the education. Besides that, the government should impose the fines on the parents who are doing the child marriage on their daughter as well. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right, so thank you to both Mr. Aubrey and Mr. Chua. I think Mr. Chua's points certainly fills us with the continued energy that we need to solve this problem. Now, Mr. Lai, I have great discussions with you about some of the exciting activities that you have been driving out of Malaysia as the special advisor to the Prime Minister. Now, this is of course greed and lust, as I said in the beginning, and that was a central focus, as was mentioned, on issues of complications during and after pregnancy and childbirth, physical abuse, as well as, I would say, what you look at the victims' loss of education and employment abilities and opportunities. So can you give us some of the examples on sex trafficking, and what's your sort of sentiments in terms of the consequences coming out of the discussions today?
All right, thank you, Mr. Yihao. Okay, before I go into the consequences of sex trafficking, I would like to share what is sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is a commercial sex act that includes prostitution, pornography, sexual performance done in exchange of any value item such as money. Sex trafficking occurs when someone uses force to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or cause a minor to commit a commercial sex act. So move forward, sex trafficking brings a lot of impact to victims. One of the consequences of sex trafficking toward the victim includes they may suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. With the mental health of PTSD, the victim will face the problems such as nightmare, severe anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and physical sensation, and also vivid flashback, which the victim will feel like the trauma is happening right now. The symptom of PTSD makes the victim feel sadness, fear, anger, and detached from other people. Besides that, the second consequences of sex trafficking toward the victim also including the relational impact. Individuals who are sex trafficked may become separated from friends, family, and other social groups very rapidly. This might due to the personal feeling of guilt and shame. Since they have been sex trafficked, it is difficult for them to find their partner, which causes them end up in alone. One of the real story of a victim that faced sex trafficking is called James Evans. He's being a gay man in his hometown which was not accepted. This suppression of his attitude leads to the substance abuse as James tries to find a peace in drug and alcohol so that he can escape from the reality that he is a gay man. This behavior was how eventually he met his trafficker. His trafficker promised him shelter, food, salary, and love when he know where to live. Instead, the trafficker forced James into unprotected sex with countless men of his province, and he is only given the enough money to buy food. Even after he had been rescued from there, he is thinking himself a piece of trash, and he was stuck in the negative thoughts and unable to move forward. Yes, Aubrey?
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Lai. Since you are talking about the story, it made me feel the need to emphasize something. So James Evans is indeed tricked, and this further shows how important education is. Education indeed serves as a great starting point for not only eradicating child marriage, as I just mentioned just now, but also other problems in human trafficking. So yeah, that's all from me. Back to you, Mr. Lai.
All right, thank you, Mr. Obi. Yes, I definitely agree with you that education indeed play an important role in this. From this example, we can find that sex trafficking has brought huge damage to him physiologically and psychologically. Thus, sex trafficking to be prevented to avoid more and more populations being sex trafficked. One of the ways to prevent sex trafficking is not to overshare. Basically, sex trafficking began with exposure of someone's private information. For example, sharing their location online or daily activity on social media. This will attract the attention of trafficker and lead to the human trafficking. Therefore, we need to set strict privacy setting and beware from stranger friend requests to prevent become victim of sex trafficking. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right. Super thank you, Mr. Lai. I certainly support your vision of stricken privacy settings. So I think we'll kind of make note of that publicly here. And I think that's a great aspiration to move forwards. Now, Mr. Zakai, you have been incredibly patient, I think, listening to many of the discussions here, and I think I know that you are not patient to share your thoughts. So you're joining us from the headquarters of Malaysia Airlines, and you are very closely tracking discussions on organ trafficking and other issues that you are there as part of a bigger organizations on human trafficking prevention movements. So now, what are the factors that increase the rate of organ trafficking and the alternatives to prevent from becoming the victim?
Thank you, Mrs. Ihao. Other factor that cause the human trafficking to increase is due to the organ removal or organ harvesting for the organ trafficking. Organ removal or organ harvesting means the process of removing healthy organ for living or decreased donor for the purpose of transplantation. Well, the human trafficking is an unethical or illegal practice that involving the removing organs for living or decreased donors without valid authorization for financial gain. There are many factors that the organ trafficking to increase nowadays. One of the factors is the demand for organ in developed country is skyrocketing, where supply is only marginally increasing. The wait list for organ has been at a high amount, and more as some people are not eligible for organ donation because of their blood type or health conditions. According to the survey, the organ that is the most needed is kidney. The other factor is poverty, because for those living in extreme poverty, economic opportunity are limited, such as little to no access to healthcare, education, and other important services, and they will be involved in organ trafficking to earn the money. On the other hand, organ brokers interested in trafficking someone we have a lot. They can take opportunity to scare the interested in trafficking organ fight community, where individuals have little to no opportunity to escape from poverty. They will approach individuals that appear relatively healthy who are willing to sell their organ for money. Besides, the awareness of people is low about organ trafficking. This will make the organ trafficker easy to take advantage of unsuspecting people as the victims who do not know the method used by the organ trafficker when they have low awareness. Now, you ask you may ask about the ways to control the organ trafficking. There are many ways for the public to prevent them becoming the victim of organ removal or organ harvesting from organ trafficking. The high demand of the organ can be settled by using other source of the organ. One of the method is tissue engineering. It's employed to repair muscle that has been seriously injured or damaged in an accident. The advent of 3D bioprinting more recently has completely altered the field of tissue engineering. Besides, we can also use the stem cell to replace organ trafficking. In the body, stem cell can replace organ trafficking. Stem cell can differentiate into many cell types. They can among the most adaptable components of our body and have undergone much research. In fact, this may be the most suitable approach to the organ limitations as part of prevention effort. It is also necessary for government, transplant centers, hospitals, civil society, non-governmental organizations, and international organizations should launch education and awareness raising campaign to raise awareness of the crime of organ trafficking among those who are most at risk of becoming victims of it, as well as among those who knowingly or unknowingly take part in it and those who come into contact with it and have the power to stop it. Besides, the media may be able to contribute to increasing public awareness of and deterring organ-related crimes, to stop them from permitting advertisements that offer organs for sales or purchase and for commercial transplantation. Print and online media could also be the target of training and awareness raising initiatives. For example, airlines may be able to report suspicious observations that may point to irregular transplantation activity. That's all for me. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Zakai. I think for that message, as you said, there is still time to push for a solid outcome on this agenda as well. I mean, I think clearly there's so many dimensions to this discussion. We have heard different things, kind of from labor trafficking to child marriage to sex trafficking and organ trafficking. And of course, there's never enough time to delve into all of this. I do want to take an opportunity to come back to each of them just to really close this conversation, which was a brief one on the forms of human trafficking. And I think we heard some positive messages, of course. There are still challenges. And so let me turn back to each of you. I think, Mr. Chua, I'm actually going to close with you because I think it would be good to hear sort of from your perspective. And start with you, Mr. Lai, just your first reflection on where we go next.
Thank you, Mr. Yihao again. As I mentioned just now, there are many ways to prevent human trafficking. One of the ways to prevent human trafficking is to beware for the advertisement that seem too good to be true. Traffickers often use the term or promises with a good payback to attract the attention of the populace. The trafficker may promise a high salary and free company accommodation to those who are interested. A very good example is the real story that I shared just now, where the trafficker promised James Evans shelter, food, shelter, salary, and love so that he can work with the trafficker, but instead he is forced to the unprotected sex with countless men. In short, we need to beware for those advertisements and promises that seem too good to be true. That's from me. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Mr. Lai. So, Mr. Chua, we started with you, and I'm coming back to you to help us kind of see a path forward through these discussions.
So, thank you. I will give some advice about the prevention step on the topic of the human trafficking. Remember, it's illegal for an employer or any person keep the passport of the employee. So be mindful and be careful. It might be the precursor of the human trafficking. So we should quickly leave the workplace and take back our passport and report the case to the police. Secondly, sometimes we might be obsessed with the job with the high amount of the salary. So, but always familiarize ourselves with the basic condition of the employment act and the right of a worker in foreign country before we go, in order to become the victim, in order to avoid us become the victim of the human trafficking. That's all from me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chua. What I would say has left me feeling more uplifted than when I started. Oh yeah, there's one unique question that I got from the World Social Forum social media account, and the question sounds like this. Is the rate of human trafficking in Malaysia higher if visa is not required for crossing the border? I think this question can be directed to Mr. Zakai.
Thank you, Mr. Yihao. I will share my opinion on this topic. If crossing border does not require visa, the human trafficking will increase because the human traffickers will not be detected and they can land to our country easily. Visa is very important in our life because it can assist law enforcement in the detection, investigation, prosecution of acts of trafficking. The visa application process allows a national consular and immigration department to verify the identity of the traveler prior to his arrival. The traveler, criminal and economic background are usually investigated. If the consular department determines the traveler does not pass the stringent background test, it reserves the right to refuse entry before the traveler even lands on their soil. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Aubrey, what's on your optimistic about this matter?
All right, since Mr. Zakai already elaborate what visa is, I will just add a little bit of my own opinion. So I'd like to explain briefly what a visa is. So a visa is often a mandatory document for international passengers to be granted access to their destination. So hence, if a visa is a part of a state's travel requirement, visitors without one will not be allowed to enter or cross their borders. So moving back to this question, yes, I totally agree with Mr. Zakai. I believe that crossing borders without a visa will indeed increase the risk of human trafficking. We have to be clear on one thing, on the fact that one of the purpose of a visa is to tackle illegal immigration. So abolishing the need for a visa means giving up on tackling human trafficking. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Sorry, I would like to add more of my view on this topic. In my opinion,
sorry to interrupt, but can you guys just wrap it up for the whole forum? It's already 9 o'clock. Just conclude it. The moderator can conclude it, please.
All right, so appreciate that, Mr. Aubrey and Mr. Zakai. I think in this, I think the optimism in this conversation is real, and I think the sense of possibility is also clear. And let us though keep an eye on the price reduction target from Tier 3 to Tier 1 that we are after, which does require stronger commitments and outcomes from policymakers and relevant authorities to contribute to the effective anti-trafficking responses, not only in Malaysia, but also worldwide. So I think Mr. Aubrey and Mr. Zakai, your message was very correct and clear. And it is up to us, in our own capabilities, in the positions that we are sitting, but also as citizens to bring in others to really help vote for this transformation as well. So we certainly will be, and I can say that we'll commit, obviously, as the World Social Forum to drive progress in this agenda. And of course, also through our annual meeting coming up in March. And with that, thanks to everyone for joining this morning for the conversation on human trafficking, and incredibly thanks to Mr. Zakai from MAP, to Mr. Lai from SHUT, to Mr. Aubrey from Hope for Justice, and to Mr. Chua from Maple. You have heard a lot about trafficking this morning, and I hope we can all emerge in this year, 2023, out of the trafficking tunnel. And with that terrible pun, I would say thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Well done. Bye-bye.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Just wondering, for the submission for the GEO, The latest is by tonight, right?
Yes, tonight.
But for the UCAM folio, there's no we can't make any submission anymore because it's like overdue.
Are you sure? Okay, let me check and get back to you later. Okay.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
All right,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
sir.
sir.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.